A devastating flash flood has struck Nepal's Rasuwa district after a massive ice and rocks collapse in Tibet triggered a powerful surge downstream. But the Tibet radio investigations along the Nepal-Tibet border is raising serious questions over the massive scales of Chinese construction in the region and whether the intensive mining, hill cutting, tunneling and infrastructure development have increased the risks and severity of disaster in the fragile Himalayan environment. The disaster struck on August 26. A massive high-altitude collapse of ice and rock in Tibet sent a huge surge of water, debris and sediment downstream into Nepal's Rasuwa district. The destruction was devastating. Bridges were swept away, roads disappeared, settlements were flooded, and lives were lost. But the immediate natural trigger may only be one part of the story. Tibet Radio has carefully investigated the border region following the disaster. Our investigation, supported by available visuals and satellite evidence, shows massive Chinese construction across the Tibetan side of the border. Mountains have been cut, large areas of land have been excavated, mining operations are visible across the region. Roads have been curved into steep mountain slopes, and extensive tunnels have been drilled through the fragile Himalayan terrain. This is not a small-scale development project, it is a massive transformation of the natural landscapes. And the concern is what happens when these levels of construction take place in one of the world's most fragile high-altitude ecosystems. The area around Girong has seen extensive Chinese infrastructure development, including border settlements, roads, and other strategic facilities. But this development comes at an environmental cost. When the mountains are cut, natural slopes are excavated, the landscape can become increasingly vulnerable to erosion and slope failure. When tunnels and roads after the terrain, natural drainage pathways can also be disrupted, and when mining and large-scale excavations are added to the equations, the pressures on an already fragile ecosystem become even greater. The question, therefore, is not simply what triggered the flood. The more important question is, did decades of intensive construction and environmental modification make the consequences worse? Experts say the initial ice and rock collapse appears to have been a natural cryospheric event, but transboundary water expert Brahmacharya argues that China's infrastructure footprint and hydrological modification may have amplified the disaster downstream consequences. Tibetan environmental specialist Lobsang Yangtze has also warned that China continues heavy constructions in Tibet's fragile border system, including hill cutting, high-altitude roads, and tunneling.
Pyoge sakyo ge di nalo konzo zugtun da de shukshimbo chi che du gala ane chidang khora pyoge sacha de khuyu da de ge thone tai du gala pe rangshin ke pe khala gorte khuyu da de kange ki thesa ge de nenga jik chagi yore di gangla ane sayun da de mangbo chungsa ge chagi yore ine di denzo ta kyone khoran zo samno matang wa chen zugtun de mangbo jik che du gala an tanang an zo ge kange chik the de wa de den sama And
Tibet Radio's investigation shows just how extensive that transformation has become. Across the border landscape, the natural mountains increasingly sit alongside roads, tunnels, mines, and settlements, and other major infrastructures. This is the bigger environmental story behind the flood. The Tibetan Plateau is often described as Asia's third pole. It is the source of some of Asia's most important rivers, supplying water to hundreds of millions of people downstream. Yet this same region is undergoing rapid infrastructure expansions. The latest disaster demonstrated the potential consequences when natural hazards interact with an aggressively engineered mountain environment. But there is another major concern: China's transparency. China has released limited official information from the Tibetan side and footage showing the Chinese rescue teams moving towards the affected areas. But according to the Tibet Radio's assessment, the footage being released does not provide a full picture of the destructions. Where is the complete casualty data? How many Tibetans have lost their lives? How many people remain missing? How many homes and settlements have been destroyed? And how much of the Tibetan side damage has actually been documented? These questions are extremely difficult to independently answer because access to Tibet is tightly controlled.
Tibetan Autonomous Region, as it's called here, like I said, as a foreigner, you need special permission to go in there, and for journalists, it's rarely granted. Usually we can only go.
The BBC and the other international medias have previously reported on the restriction faced by independent journalists attempting to report from Tibet. So while China showcases rescue operation through state-controlled media, independent journalists have limited ability to reach the affected communities and verify the situation themselves. The same concern were raised after the 2025 Tingri earthquake, when a major earthquake devastated Tibetan communities. And now, after another catastrophic disaster, the question remains, why is independent access to Tibet is still so restricted, and why is comprehensive information about the human cause so difficult to obtain? Tibet Radio investigations points to another urgent issue: environmental accountability. Natural disaster cannot always be prevented, but responsibility development can reduce or increase the consequences. The massive constructions, mining and tunneling documented by Tibet Radio along the border demand serious independent scientific investigations. The question is no longer whether the mountains are being transformed, they clearly are. The question is whether that transformation is making communities downstream more vulnerable. And this disaster in Nepal may be the clearest warning yet. Because when the fragile mountains of Tibet are curved, drilled, mined and engineered on the massive scale, the consequences does not necessarily stop at the border. They can come downstream, and this time Nepal paid the price.